Smoke of incense caresses my face as I enter the lavish hall, filled with expensive wines, foods, and furniture. I look around and take in the sight, having been invited to this event of decadence by a colleague, promising a night that I would never forget. I take a seat at a single booth near the main event, as I am quite early, as few other guests have arrived. The back of the room is where my seat is, a stage where the main event will happen. In the main event, however, no one will give me exact details as to what that is. A masked waiter pours me some wine and leaves me a bowl of grapes for me without asking me. The lack of details is compensated for by this service and the atmosphere of the theater I find myself in. I enjoy my wine and grapes as more and more guests begin to arrive. As soon as everyone is seated and served, the lights begin to dim. The main event has just begun. We are sorry to keep you waiting. Tonight, our host will be the one to dance for you as the main event. Now, without further ado, the mask. The crowd erupts in an applause, and after that quiet downs, the curtain rises, and a single entity is in the center of the stage. The music begins. An operatic sonnet, but something is off about it. I cannot tell, but I don't care. The mask, as she calls herself, is entrancing, to say the least. I am stuck, staring at her as she prances and dances around the stage in acrobatic grace. As she prances, other dancers join her from backstage, but they work their way into the audience. They spread out and begin dancing for specific grooves solitarily. I am just aware enough to realize the mask is approaching me, still dancing. She is beautiful, distractingly so. She brushes her hand on my face and asks, "Wish to be my plaything?" Before I can answer, I realize that my cheek is bleeding, where her hand had brushed. At the same time, screams fill the audience as the dancers begin to kill the guests. I turn back to the mask, and I see what she really is now. A monster. A feminine figure still, but with two arms ending in crab claw hands, and a third holding a staff with both the tragedy and humor mask attached to it, and a garish-looking face. But I am still entranced by her power, and I cannot help myself. I will. Body, mind, and soul. And in that moment I knew I was forever shackled to her will. Welcome, Warlords and Generals, to another video. Today we shall be covering the named demonic champions of Slaanesh, or at least those with rules. And I am covering very basics. I am going to eventually be doing a more deep dive into each one of these champions later down the road. And we shall start with the contents of the story at the opening with the mask. This herald was once one of the most favored of Slaanesh's demons, dancing for his pleasure or whenever his mood may have been dark. Being once his chief handmaiden, oiling and brushing his hair, or displaying entrancing acrobatics to bring him out of his dour moods. Yet regardless of his indulgences and the mask's dedication, she would become one of his most hated servants. During what would become known as the Provocation Wars, Tzeentch had tricked Slaanesh into an unwinnable set of battles with both Nurgle and Khorne, and after several campaign losses, all Slaanesh was left with was defeat and humiliation. The mask, seeing her master in such a sour mood, began to dance like she had never danced before. Where this would have once filled Slaanesh with cheer and joy, this dance felt more like an insult, each perfectly executed feat of acrobats being a thorn stabbed into his pride. Eventually, he had had enough, and Slaanesh cast out his favored servant, claiming, "If you insist to dance, then dance forevermore." This curse has led to the mask working tirelessly to spread Slaanesh's influence to try to regain his favor. Leading many demons to real space with her entrancing moves, she dances across both the warp and real space. Demonettes who witness this dancing are enraptured into following her. She has been cited taunting bloodletters by dancing in front of Khorne's mighty fortress. Mortals who witness this figure dancing lead them to indulging so far beyond restraint it empowers the mask and allows for even more of Slaanesh's servants to be brought forth into real space. As she dances, she enacts Slaanesh's history and glories, as well as his inevitable destiny. The mask she carries twists into the emotion she needs for the current mood of the story she is reenacting. As she dances, all those who gaze upon this figure are compelled to join, mortal and demon alike. The dance of dreaming, this trope of hers, will be lulled into sleep to show of Slaanesh's slumbering, awaiting for rebirth, whereas the dance of death is a reenactment of one of the greatest victories Slaanesh had ever over Khorne. The cast in this case leap, flail, and claw at their own throats. Such is the power over others, they will, in their ecstasy, dance until they die, literally, just to keep up with the graceful moves of the mask. The mask makes many incursions into real space, dancing to the chaotic tone of the other Chaos God's minions working their chaos. When she dances with her fellow demons, she adds to the feel of ecstasy to the battle tenfold, to the point demonettes beg her to stay. She would, if she had her own will. But Slaanesh remains petulant in his punishment upon the mask, so she is continue to follow the fickle nature of her dance curse until Slaanesh wishes to remove it, which may be never. And that is the mask, a tragic fail of trying to be too loyal to one's sire. Our next champion, or champions, are a strangely wholesome story for Warhammer lore, especially being attached to not just a Chaos champion, but Slaanesh him/herself. This is Syl-esque. Once there was a herald of Slaanesh by the name of Syl Ludetongue, who had ambitions of raising a mortal to glory and present them to Slaanesh. However, she was ridiculed for growing emotionally attached to her champions, an odd and rare quality amongst the heralds of Slaanesh. But Syl ignored their jeers regardless. She had little luck in her champion department until a tribal leader by the name of Esk came into the arena. No one knew where he came from, only that he had entered the realm of chaos willingly to submit to Slaanesh. This new warrior turned out to be the perfect vessel for Syl's power and blessing, and thus became his partner. Esk would fight his way to glory, slaughtering his way up the ranks, eventually being given the ultimate gift, apotheosis, but even being given the ultimate blessing for a mortal, and the fact Syl is her matron in the arena, both were jeered and treated lesser than the others. Circumstances would occur where both were exiled, and in this exile committed a ritual to become a symbiotic creature of equal power, working as one. Together, they slaughtered their way into Slaanesh's throne room of the Palace of Pleasure, during a Khornate invasion no less. After helping clear the throne room, Slaanesh gifted this pair immense body and new powers, just for their reward of helping clear the throne room. Clearing the throne room was not the only reason for this reward, however, but as well as the fact that now Slaanesh could gloat to Khorne that his invasion was thwarted by a lowly mortal and an exiled herald. After this moment, they became known as Syl-esque, the Vengeful Alliance, as they did indeed kill all the heralds and other dissenters that had tried to separate them from each other and had made their climb to glory so much more difficult. And that is the story of one of the few wholesome murder couples covered, and one of the few wholesome stories in general in Warhammer covered at all. Now we're going to go cover Slaanesh's huntsman, Shalaxi Hellbane, who also goes by the Monarch of the Hunt is a favored keeper of secrets who is made and blessed to hunt down and kill the other greater demons of other chaos gods, specifically and especially Khorne's bloodthirsters. When on the hunt for other greater demons, and especially bloodthirsters, her preferred favored prey, Slaanesh wields a spear known as Soul Piercer, the end of many demons, and the Shining Aegis, a master-crafted shield Slaanesh uses to block and parry blows effortlessly. And her cloak is magical and semi-sentient, turning into tentacles and ensnaring foes. And yes, we have all seen enough hentai to know about this dead meme. And unfortunately, without going into Psychic Awakening stories and the like, that's all with Shalaxi Hellbane. So whenever I do a video on Shalaxi, I will be briefly covering that. On to our next favored Keeper of Secrets, who also doesn't have a ton of lore behind it besides specific events, is Zaraknil. Known as the Bringer of Torment, Soul Eater, the Unholy One, and the Angel of Despair, it is a Keeper of Secrets who is held above all others. She is the bane of the Eldari race, or known as the Eldar. In particular, she has a preference for Exodites Eldar, feasting on the Soul Stones and sending them to Slaanesh herself. This aptitude to feast on soul stones is not the main reason she has the title of Soul Eater, however. This comes from one of the blades she wields, which has supped upon many souls and blood since being made millennia ago. Being one of, if not the most powerful Keeper of Secrets, she has not made it into real space very often, but anytime she does, thousands fall into depravity of her master just by her showing up. And much like Shalaxi, unfortunately, there is not much lore on Zaraknil by herself. She was involved in some events and helped certain events occur, but those will be covered in her separate video when I get around to it. On that note, however, we have reached the end of the video. If you liked this video, please leave a like. If you want to see more from me, please subscribe. And if you want to have a conversation about the contents of the lore, leave a comment. I hope you enjoyed the video, and happy wargaming.